I know that Professor MOEKETSI Letseka will join us at some point. I'm not sure we have him yet, and media will inform me. He's there right now? Wow. Professor MOEKETSI Letseka is going to be speaking to us on social justice systems and accessing resilient and inclusive education through open distance and e-learning. Let's give Professor Letseka a warm University of Lagos welcome.
Hello, good morning. If it's morning in Lagos, here in South Africa it's afternoon. I'm MOEKETSI Letseka. I'm Professor of Philosophy of Education, holder of the endowed UNESCO chair on open distance learning at UNISA. And my presentation for this particular panel is titled Social Justice Systems and Accessing Resilient and Inclusive Education through Open Distance and E-Learning. I want to start by declaring that as holder of the UNESCO chair, I'll be sharing a lot of work that emanates from UNESCO that speaks to the theme of the panel, that also speaks to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we are navigating our way out of this. In March last year, when COVID broke out, the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Ozule, launched the UNESCO Global Education Consortium. And on the occasion of that launch, she announced or reported that as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19, over 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries worldwide were affected by school closures due to COVID-19. And that announcement basically threw into us all educators a challenge. How do we continue with the process of education when we no longer have access to schools, when we never have access to classes, to laboratories, to libraries? Because one of the conditions of COVID-19 is social distancing. And I think the clarion call at the time was stay at home. And Ms. Ozile was actually saying that this huge number is a number that now faces educators. And we need to find ways of ensuring that the education project continues despite the circumstances brought to us by the outbreak of the pandemic. Earlier this year in 2021, again, UNESCO noted that more than 800 million learners are still affected by the full or partial closure of schools. This is the challenge. And in line with the theme of this panel, how do we find resilient ways of delivering education through online and distance teaching? These statistics really look us in the face and they say to us, what are we doing? This month was also the UNESCO's International Literacy Day, also within the context of COVID-19. As a holder of the endowed UNESCO chair, I was called upon to speak nationally on television and radio, and I was invited into a range of functions that celebrated that. These are the key points that I need to share with the panelists to say, these are the things that out of those presentations, I can pick up three major trends that I highlighted in my talks. One is that the Literacy Day through UNESCO requires us to create an opportunity to reimagine future literacy teaching and learning within and beyond the context of the global COVID-19 pandemic. It requires us to focus on the interplay of literacy and digital skills required by non-literate youth and adults. And it requires us, furthermore, to make technology-enabled literacy learning inclusive and meaningful to all. This year, I invited Professor Som Naidu, who is the former Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of South Pacific in Fiji. Prof. Naidu and I have a very wonderful collaborative relationship, and we share a lot of things, part of scholarship. And he spoke at the UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning's research seminars. He spoke of building resilience in ODEL post-COVID-19. And he argued that resilience is a complex process which requires, along with subject matter knowledge, a deep understanding of learners, learning, and their motivations. But he also argued further that the resilience of modern day universities has never been tested as thoroughly as it has by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And he put forth a thesis that for a future-focused education, there is need for a rethink and calibration of educational as well as institutional choreographies. And this is, I think, consistent with the theme of today's seminar. What does this mean, basically? We are now living in the dawn of the COVID-19 pandemic, and whether we are in schools or whether we are in our own homes, the COVID-19 requires us to plug into the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution and navigate our ways around how well we deliver on the education project. The fourth industrial revolution is a move from the many revolutions that took place before. We move from the steam revolution to the assembly line, which is popularized by Ford, and the building up of cars, to the outburst of computer era. But now we have moved further. We have moved into an era of global connectivity, which is marked by ubiquitous Wi-Fi and the need to reach out to everybody else through digital facilities. And this is what the fourth industrial revolution is all about. Klaus Schwab, who is the founder of the World Economic Forum, has written this powerful book just titled The Fourth Industrial Revolution. And in it he says, it is almost inevitable that the fourth industrial revolution will have a major impact on labor markets and workplaces around the world. It will demand and place more emphasis on the ability of workers to adapt continuously and learn new skills and approaches within a variety of contexts. What this means is that we as educators, we are called upon to think of multiple ways of developing approaches to learning, of interfering, interfacing, of mediating, basically of utilizing and being at home with digital facilities so that we can then deliver on the education process. And the World Economic Forum argued then that an estimated 65% of children entering primary schools today will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that don't yet exist. The ability to anticipate and prepare for future skills, requirements, job content, and the aggregate effects on employment is increasingly critical for businesses. governments, and individuals in order to fully seize the opportunities presented by these trends and to mitigate undesirable outcomes. What I find fascinating with this observation is that the digital revolution creates an environment where the skills that will be required possibly in around 2030 are not yet here. And what this does is it calls upon us as distance learning officials to reimagine that future. What will that future look like? But it means something else more. It means that we are now living in an era where we need to harness the opportunities that the fourth industrial revolution brings to us. And these are, for example, artificial intelligence. We need to draw on the Internet of Things. We need to harness fourth industrial revolution and blockchains. We are now in an era where we need to embrace distance learning and the use of technologies. Teaching has never been changed. It's never been revolutionized and affected than it is now. We are now teaching from home. We have to work from home. We have to utilize the devices of digital age. We have to use all Skype, Microsoft Teams, you name it. But we also have to juggle families while we are working, because we're working from home. We are also managing families. We are juggling life at home, cooking, looking after children. How do we continue ensuring that the education project is successful? It means we need to, as it were, adapt for teaching in a digital age. And Professor Tony Bates of Canada has published this wonderful book titled Teaching in a Digital Age. It's a book that is accessible. What does being in the digital age means? The book Digital Literacy for Learning defines digital literacy as the awareness, attitude, and ability of individuals to appropriately use digital tools and facilities to identify, access, manage, integrate, evaluate, analyze, and synthesize digital resources, construct new knowledge, create media expressions, and communicate with others in the context of specific life situations in order to enable constructive social actions and to reflect upon the processes. But digital literacy assumes a whole range of stages. One of those is being digitally competent, being digitally literate, being digitally aware. So you move from the stage where you acquire knowledge and cognition of digitality, where you understand it in a sense where you are able to apply it in the real world, and then you transition to a stage which is the highest stage, where you can then, as it were, think about digitality as second nature. But we are in an open distance learning environment. It means COVID-19, the fourth industrial revolution, requires us to think more clearly and critically about what it means to be in the online education space. What does it mean to operate open learning? It calls us also to say, what are the resources that we need in this space? Some of those are the MOOC, the massive open online courses. How well vested are we in creating MOOCs as tools that we can use to reach out to our students? But it also calls upon us to be very clear about our engagement with publishers so that we can get into the open educational resources space, meaning make educational resources freely available. Universities across the world, even those that we're in contact, have been forced upon to look into themselves to say, do they have the infrastructure, for example, of the learning management systems? Most distance education institutions were already comfortable in the LMS culture with the outbreak of open distance learning, but the same cannot be said about most distance learning, most contact institutions. A university like UNISA, where I work, operate a learning management system called My UNISA, And in that, we use the platform Moodle. When we go out to teach as lecturers, we use the Microsoft Teams, which is a platform on which I'm actually rendering this presentation. Through a combination of all these at UNISA, despite the outbreak of COVID-19, we have been able to reach out to our students, which means UNISA has been resilient in terms of delivering its teaching, research, and community outreach projects. Here at the UNESCO chair, we run a successful seminar program, which we simply call the UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning Seminar series. We normally run these 10 seminars in a year, starting in February and in November. And at the outbreak of 2020, we made a strategic decision right away that with all these digital facilities that UNISA has, we are going to launch the seminars online. And I must tell you, we have been very, very successful. We have, since 2019, 2020, up to now, we have been able to fulfill our mandate of inviting experts across the world to share their research through the UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning Research Seminar Series using our Microsoft facilities. As far as last month, for example, in August, we were able to launch a successful UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning together with the Research Director at UNISA, the Open Distance and E-Learning Virtual Conference, where we attracted in excess of 1,360 delegates. I think there were 24 representations from the African continent. There were people coming from Canada, the United States, you name Australia, in Europe, most of European countries. So we were able to demonstrate resilience within the outbreak of COVID-19 by utilizing the resources that are brought about by the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And my take for this particular panel is that we really need to find creative ways of harnessing the benefits and tools that are brought to us by the Fourth Industrial Revolution in order to reach out and be able to deliver resilient teaching, learning, and research through open distance learning. I want to thank you.
Thank you, Professor MOEKETSI LETSEKA. Please be aware that when we are done with this panel, you'll be one of the earliest that I would come to for some of the concerns that you raised in the second round of conversations and interventions. Professor LETSEKA has basically said it's important that we harness the tools that technology brings to us for furthering education and recalibrating open distance education and e-learning, awareness, aptitude, access, and he has also encouraged synthesization of digital resources and multiple ways of approaching learning. And he has also explained that within the University of South Africa, where he's UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning, they have practiced this throughout the COVID period, and who knows what the world will throw at us going forward. We must be ready at all times. Another round of applause for Professor LETSEKA.